Support this podcast via our Patreon and get more writerly goodness. Visit patreon.com/nanocast to join up.
Welcome to NaNoWriMo Every Month. My name is J. Daniel Sawyer. I'm the author of some 20 books, 34 short stories, and numerous articles and other things, and I am your guide on this journey to use NaNoWriMo to level up to professional output levels. Welcome to The Questions, Episode 25. Today, Sgt Mike asks, once you've finished your novel, how do you go about finding good editors or cover designers and the other people necessary to finalize the text for publishing? Well, Mike, there are basically two approaches you can take. One of them is to do it all yourself, or at least in-house if you have a best friend or a partner or a spouse who is good at some of these things. The other is to hire it done. I'm going to walk you through both of them. The basic process you're going to need to go through is this. First, you write the manuscript. Then you need to proof the manuscript for whatever you need to proof it for. It at the very least will need a copy edit pass. Longer works will probably need a continuity pass, where you make sure that the character's eyes stay the same color and that you're not changing premises halfway through the story and other basic errors like that. Some particular kinds of books will need domain-specific realism passes. If it's a military book and you're not in the military and you're not a military expert, you would want to have someone look at it who is good at that sort of thing to make sure that you've got the tone right, that you've got the ranks right, that kind of thing. And that's true with, military, police, historical periods, particular kinds of technology, that sort of thing. That's generally important only when the book is heavily dependent on that sort of thing. If your book is focused somewhere else and a military person happens to walk in and you use the wrong nomenclature, it's not going to throw people out of the book like it would if you screwed it up in a military romance. And the reason is that the book that incidentally incorporates military elements is not going to attract the same audience that a book that depends on military elements does. And that's true for all sorts of technology and whatnot. Ken Follett's thriller Code to Zero is about intrigue around the early Apollo moon missions. And I loved the book until several points in the climax, Follett uses British slang for American technological things. And as an enthusiastic fan of both language and the history of the space program, that threw me out of the book so fast that I never successfully got back into it. The resolution of the book was fine, and I would have really loved it if he hadn't thrown me out, but I had to work so hard to get back into that book right at the climax that it drove me nuts. So a mistake like that will always lose you people for whom that domain is their specific area of expertise. But if your story is not focused on that domain, it's one of those areas that you can let things slide. It's a good risk because the percentage of the audience who's going to have that expertise and is going to care about it is going to be relatively small. Now, once you have the finished manuscript, you'll want to pull the document into your ebook authoring suite. That may be Scrivener, that may be Juto, that may be Sigil, it may be one of any number of other programs. And you want to conform it to your ebook design template and get it compliant with your house style and order the pages and do your chapter breaks and all that good stuff. Then before you output that ebook, you're also going to need some cover art. So you need to design and create some good cover art that is in keeping with your brand, that sets proper customer expectations for your book, so it's in compliance with the general aesthetic of whatever genre you're writing in, communicates successfully to the reader, that kind of thing, as best you can. You can always revise these things as you get better. And then once all that's done, you want to output your ebook and go ahead and publish it with the proper categories. Now, at the same time and in parallel, if your operation's running smoothly, you want to be pulling the document into a layout program such as Scribus or InDesign and laying it out for paperback distribution and then uploading it to CreateSpace or Ingram Spark or whatnot along with a wraparound cover that you've also done in Scribus or InDesign with appropriate back cover copy and everything. Once it's uploaded for distribution and you've got your sales copy and your categories done on both platforms and agreed to publish it, and you've gone through the proof process on paperbacks and you've authorized sale, then you're published and it's time to move on and work on the next book. So that's how the whole process works. And in that process, that means you need someone to do your copy editing, someone to do domain-specific editing, someone to do continuity editing. These can all be the same person. Someone to implement changes. That has to be you. You really don't want to outsource that job. Implementing changes to your book as a result of the suggestions, and they are always suggestions, that you get from your beta readers or editors or whatever you call them. And then you need an ebook author and a cover designer and a paperback layout person. That's your team. That team can be as small as 2 people or as numerous as 30. It depends on what you can afford, how many hands you want in your pie, and what you actually need. On some of our books here, the team has gotten as big as 10 because of domain-specific feedback from various people and from just having seasons where all my beta readers are bugging me for material at the same time. Over the years, I've built up a stable of about 10 beta readers. These are good, dependable people who love to read my stories and who are happy to copy edit for the privilege of getting them early and who are happy to leave the particular kinds of feedback I need in the marginal notes. The first one of these people I picked up at a Star Trek party in college and wound up partnering up with her, and we've been together around 20 years. And she just happens to really like what I write, in addition to liking my jokes and my cooking, so she sticks around for the stories, basically, and that's Kitty Nikian. Now, that wasn't the first one I ever had. The first one I had was a mentor in junior high, I think it was. He was a youth group leader who really wanted to encourage me on the path to being a writer, so he subjected himself to beta reads of my first and worst novel. For years he did. And I was kind of pushy as a kid, so I also roped a couple of English teachers along the way into helping me. But in my adult career, Kitty Nikian was the first beta reader I had that stuck with me. The next one I picked up at a science fiction convention. I was in a panel on, I believe it was science and religion, as an audience member. And there was a very well-spoken, very well-educated, very outspoken woman sitting next to me who was about 20 years my senior, and with whom I agreed on nothing. But she was the sort of person that was such a pleasure to disagree with because she was well-spoken. She knew exactly how to articulate her opinions. She was very interested in the dialogue rather than in being right. It's the kind of person that you can sit down over coffee with and argue for hours and never come to an agreement and have a fantastic time. And so at the end of this panel, I turned to her and I handed her my card and I said, I agree with you on nothing, but I would love to disagree with you over coffee. Drop me a line sometime. And she said, well, I actually live 200 miles away, so that won't happen. How about we go get coffee now? So we did. And it turned out that we were both authors, and we were both looking for a writing buddy to hold us accountable and to beta read for us. And so we decided to become writing buddies. She is still betaing my books all these years later, and she is fantastic, and it's been great. The rest of my betas I've picked up more or less out of the fan mail. People who I've become friends with as a result of them being fans of my work, who tended to send me annoying comments about typos that slipped through the cracks and continuity errors I had missed that sort of undermined essential plot points in my books and that sort of thing. And I get 2 or 3 of those from somebody. And invariably, if they're good enough at this, I'll do one of 2 things. If they're the kind of person that I think I can deputize, because they seem to have a lot of free time on their hands, I will try to get them to beta for me the next book. And if they're not, I'll send them a free pre-release copy of the next book, just as a thank you, because they've been a help to me in improving my product, and it's fantastic. But basically you find those beta readers by being a little pushy. And when people find out you're a writer, once you've got a certain amount under your belt, they'll basically start throwing themselves at you for beta reading. Oh, I love to read. Do you ever need any help beta reading your books? Do you ever need anyone to proofread for you? Because I could totally do that. It's a scam on their part to try to get pre-release free copies of books, but it's a mutually beneficial scam, so you'll have your pick. Early on, what you need, if you're looking to find your first couple of beta readers, what you need are someone who loves to read for the sake of reading and who is going to be willing to read your books as a reader, and someone who's got a competent command of the English language, and someone who will leave your dialogue alone. Unless, they'll tell you if it's confusing, but the temptation of a lot of beta readers, particularly ones who haven't been around the block, is to try to correct all your grammar and make your story into proper English, because they don't understand that fiction doesn't obey the rules of proper English. Fiction obeys the rules of colloquial English, which is the way that people speak. And the voicier your narrator is, the more colloquially they speak, which means the less grammatically they speak. And that's the same for all your characters, and each one of them may have a different colloquial grammatical construction default, and you need your beta readers to point out your spelling mistakes and point out when things get too confusing for you, but you don't want them correcting your grammar, because that can rip the soul out of your book, at least when you're doing fiction. Now, for domain-specific experts, having a rich and varied social life, or at least online social life, can really help that. Make use of the Friends of Friends network. If you're wanting to write science fiction set at a particle accelerator, find someone who works at a particle accelerator and ask them to go over your book. And if you're having trouble doing it de novo, go take a tour of a particle accelerator, call them up and say, I'm a writer setting a story in a particle accelerator. I would love to get an idea of how it works. Do you have a grad student that would be willing to take me on a tour? Almost always the answer will be yes. So you go, you take a tour, you ask all the questions you can, you establish a good rapport, and then at the end you say, you've been a fantastic help, can I get your name to credit you in the acknowledgments? And by the way, would you be willing to look at this before I release it to the public so I can make sure I didn't make any boneheaded errors? And almost always, the answer will be yes. It's amazing. Amanda Palmer says this in The Art of Asking, but it's truly amazing what you get when you simply have the gonads to ask for it. People will say no, frequently, and that's okay, because you're not worried about people who say no, you just want to find the people who will say yes. So, early on you need to be pushy and ask for things. As you establish a reputation, people will begin to offer things to you before you can ask for them, and then it's your job to decide whether they're the kind of person you want to work with or not. Now, as far as artists, like layout artists and cover artists and whatnot, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. First of all, you can learn to do it yourself, and this is actually not a bad idea, even if you wind up hiring the work done. Because the better you are at cover design, the better you're going to be at selecting and managing subcontractors. It's an art that takes 3 to 5 years to learn well, and probably 10 years to master. It's not the same as fine arts. At AWP, which is my publishing company, the two of us came out of a fine arts background. We were both very good fine visual artists when we started doing commercial art, and we then proceeded to fall flat on our faces for 4 straight years learning the difference between fine art and commercial art. Because there's a lot of stuff that cross-applies, but the entire intent is different, and the commercial art is subject to a whole set of constraints that fine art is not. And this is why, if you go on Amazon, this won't be the case for much longer, but if you go on Amazon and you look up my books, Predestination and Other Games of Chance, or Free Will and Other Compulsions, you will see covers on those that just don't look like they belong on science fiction books. In today's marketplace, they kind of look like maybe there's some weird kind of erotica covers. Now, back in the 1970s, they would have played fine on science fiction book covers. They would have played brilliantly. And those covers are that way because I was a fine artist who did a lot of fine art nude photography, and I had a couple of models I loved working with, so we went out when I started writing this series, and I got enough great photos to do the entire series, all 5 books that are planned, in this type of style. And I mapped out all the 5 books, and I put the artwork together for all the 5 books, and we put the titles on the first couple of them, and we put them up, and guess what? It doesn't sell because of the covers. The reviews from people who listen to the podcast or who actually read the books are fantastic, but people don't pick them up because the covers say the wrong thing to the audience today. So we're going to be redoing the covers and retitling the series this year, because what would look fantastic in a fine art or a pop art gallery, and what would have looked good in the context of an era of cover design that I had been most exposed to, which was the 70s and 80s, which is where a lot of the books on my shelves are from, the ones that I've kept, completely doesn't work in today's marketplace. There's a whole different set of constraints and expectations on commercial artwork, particularly on cover design, and those constraints change every few years. And so learning to do proper cover design and manage cover design is a learning curve, but just about anyone can do it as long as you're willing to pay attention. So I would very much encourage you to learn yourself. When you go to hire it done, check out Fiverr.com and look at Lucky Bat Books. Lucky Bat is also a fantastic place to hire layout artists, and also to hire commercial editors if you're having a hell of a time finding beta readers. Cindy Geddes at Lucky Bat Books is an incredibly sharp businesswoman, and she keeps a very good stable of people that are there for hire, many of whom I've worked with in some capacity or another, and who do fantastic work. They're definitely worth taking a look. Fiverr.com, as I said, is another sort of place. It's an open marketplace of artists. I think it's Fiverr.com. And there's a few other places like that on the internet. And you can find people on Craigslist and whatnot. The other thing you can do is go to local fan conventions, makers fairs, science fiction conventions, mystery writers conventions, and even Comic-Cons, and network heavily with the people in the arts room. Finally, it's hard to go wrong with stock photo sites. If you know a lot about typography but you're useless with artwork, go to places like Shutterfly and Shutterstock and other places like that, where you can pay a few bucks to license some stock photography or some stock artwork and use that as the background and make your typography into the feature, or combine 2 different photos in Photoshop or GIMP and use those as your artwork and make your typography a feature. That's a long answer to a fairly short question, but that's how you pull it off. I hope that's been helpful. Please send any follow-ups to feedback@jdsawyer.net or by commenting on the blog at NaNoWriMoEveryMonth.com, and I'll see you tomorrow. NaNoWriMo Every Month is written and presented by J. Daniel Sawyer and produced by Artistic Whispers Productions. Visit our website at NaNoWriMoEveryMonth.com and leave a tip in the tip jar or join the Patreon to support this podcast. NaNoWriMo Every Month is copyright 2016 by J. Daniel Sawyer and Artistic Whispers Productions and is released under a Creative Commons Non-Commercial Attribution No Derivatives license.